come on, make a move. Everybody, say it, make a move. 1776, a great year for the United States of America, which we now commemorate by speed-eating hot dogs and blowing stuff up. Hopefully not at the same time. Ah, youth. It's now that we give thanks for some very good ideas of a few smart people in white wigs. Here's one old-timer with some great ideas. Can anybody guess who? Anyone? Bueller. It is, of course, not one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, but in fact a Scotsman by the name of Adam Smith. In 1776, Mr. Smith published a book called The Wealth of Nations, which uses language like this. It is the great multiplication of the productions of all the different arts in consequence of the division of labor which occasions in a well-governed society that universal opulence which extends itself to the lowest ranks of the people. Hidden in the almost indecipherable language of Wealth of Nations is a surprisingly catchy little concept called the invisible hand. I'll use Mr. Smith's own words here because I can understand them, sort of. Every individual neither intends to promote the public interest nor knows how much he is promoting it. He intends only his own security, and by directing that industry in such a manner as its produce may be of the greatest value, he intends only his own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. This is an absolutely brilliant insight, not only because it is inarguably true and proven by history, but because it explains a big part of why humans keep slipping into the philosophical trap unintentionally set for them by, let's assume, well-intentioned people like Karl Marx. You see, the thing about the invisible hand is, well, you can't see it. At least not over short periods of time. Smith's key concept is that in a free society, people exchanging goods and services have no choice but to improve the general welfare of humanity. This is because, for example, if someone is offered a job, it's likely that he or she is one of the people who will best help their employer to thrive. And to thrive, the employer must provide better goods and services to their customers than their competitors. The employer benefits and the customer benefits. Now, as for the employee, she would only take this job if it was better than the other options available to her. Otherwise, why would she take it? The employee benefits. The same thing happens when we buy food and clothes and everything else. And these kinds of exchanges happen millions and millions and millions. Sorry. Not likely to make the evening news. There's a flip side of this concept, which unfortunately Mr. Smith did not elucidate. For our purposes, we will call this the invisible fist theory of economics. Here's what it means. As a general rule, it's pretty obvious when bad things happen in a free society. Let's take the pharmaceutical industry. There are a lot of headlines, and there should be, in the very rare cases when a company's drug being used as recommended, hurts someone. In these cases, there should be swift and severe retribution, compensation for victims, and potentially jail time for perpetrators. In the rare case when a company raises prices suddenly for dubious reasons, the press is right to bring negative attention, and we are right to impose economic consequences through boycotts, demonstrations, whatever we think is necessary, short of threatening jail time. But in almost all cases, our idea of doing something is to create a permanent lumbering federal bureaucracy whose stated job is to punish companies for things they never did, and thereby doing much more harm than good. The problem is this. Let's say you're a government official deciding whether or not to approve a new drug. What is the one thing you absolutely cannot do? You cannot, under any circumstances, approve a drug that turns out to be unsafe. You can, however, decline to approve or delay approval of hundreds of drugs that ultimately prove to be life-saving. Nobody's going to remember or probably even recognize those delays, or disapprovals, not even when they end up costing many more lives than are saved. In the late 1950s and early 60s, a drug called thalidomide was used to treat morning sickness and other ailments in pregnant mothers. This drug caused birth defects in tens of thousands of babies in many countries. It was a catastrophe. The United States Food and Drug Administration refused to approve this drug for use in the United States, probably saving thousands of families from the horrible effects of the improper use of this drug. Everything looked great. This is the visible part. In 1962, the FDA's mission was expanded to include not only drug safety, but also to ensure that all drugs marketed in the United States were effective for their intended use. In the following years, the number of medicines approved for use in the United States plummeted. Many life-saving drugs that were approved in other countries were not approved here, or were approved too late for many. If you look at the mortality statistics for patients treated with these drugs abroad, but not treated in the United States because of delayed approval, hundreds of thousands of lives were lost. Who is counting them? It now costs around $3 billion to bring a new medicine to market. Who is counting the lives lost for medicines not pursued because of these artificially high development costs? This is the invisible part. Similarly, who measures the number of people who have not become self-sufficient and therefore had more rewarding lives due to the so-called war on poverty? Who measures how many teens are unemployed because of jobs lost due to minimum wage increases? And just to digress for a minute, prior to a recent round of minimum wage increases, the market economy had already effectively raised the minimum wage. Any guess as to how many employees were making the minimum wage? 3%. 3%. Nearly all of them teens or others on their way to somewhere else. We have this vague, nagging sense that there's a nebulous them out there, let's say in the pharmaceutical industry, trying to profit at our expense, in this case by poisoning and defrauding us. Here's an interesting question. Would you be willing to develop or sell an unsafe medicine so you could profit at someone else's expense? I'm guessing no. What the heck makes you think they are? They are us and we are them, plus or minus of some intelligence and a college degree and probably some luck. And I hate to burst the old balloon, but in many ways, they're better than us. They are making medicines that save people's lives. What are we doing? Me? Making a bunch of dumb videos. Big deal. Which job is more important, theirs or ours? History, and really logic and biology and common sense, all tell us quite clearly that Adam Smith was right and Karl Marx was wrong. But the idea of eliminating the sometimes gut-wrenching individual consequences of a free society, and don't kid yourself, there are some, keeps leading us to disregard history and the proven formula for human success in favor of the emotionally satisfying but species-damaging path of restricted individual freedom. This philosophy continues to linger long after it should have been tossed on history's philosophical dung heap, mostly for two reasons. One, it allows us to feel virtuous without actually doing anything. And two, there is a visible and short-term action. And I think of these two, the first one is probably the most important. Recognizing the threat posed by the invisible fist is difficult. Most of us are just trying to keep our bank accounts balanced. But it's encouraging, I think, that the vast majority of us, in broad terms, want the same thing: peace, prosperity, health, and happiness. A conversation is always the first step in reaching any goal. We need more conversation, not less. So if you're a free market hater, give yourself a break. Take the day off. You folks are always looking for something like that, right? And give thanks for Adam Smith. And I promise that I'll find a day sometime soon to celebrate the accomplishments of your favorite guy. I'll start now. Cool beard. I'll do better next time.